Again, welcome everybody. My name is Tyler Nelson. I'm the National Training Manager for RTI, and with me is the incomparable Vincent Bova, our Dealer Experience Manager, and all around great guy.
I'll give you the 20 bucks.
Yeah. We love doing these sessions together because we kind of bounce some different ideas. We can answer questions. We can interject different topics and information that would be valuable to you as you go along during the session. But as we mentioned, please make sure to put your questions in the question answer section rather than the webinar chat area, so that we can continue the educational growth of RTI Excel and the content that we do put out on a consistent basis. So let's kick it off right away. I would like to make sure that everybody has an idea of what we're going to be covering. And the first thing is that we want to make sure that you understand what the system requirements of this new Integration Designer 11 is, and how it's going to be beneficial to you and what's required of you. We also want to talk about when the update happened, there were a couple of reasons why we did it. Features and updates were one, but there was also a bug fix that you may or may not have known about that really actually increase the speed of the overall system itself significantly. I want to showcase some of the new graphic design updates that we did, and of course talk about the major new features that we've added in to the system and Integration Designer 11. So let's kick it off right away. What are the system requirements for 11.3? First one, this is the first iteration of Integration Designer that requires a PC-based computer that has a 64-bit operating system and Windows 10 or higher, meaning you can't be utilizing any sort of emulation on Macs. You can't use a 32-bit machine. If you try to do the update, you will run into an error message. So please make sure that you do have a 64-bit machine that utilizes Windows 10 or higher as its native OS. The features that are built into Integration Designer 11.3 require that type of the processing power to build it into the system and to map it out. And if you don't have that, it just won't work. So that's why this is the first iteration that we actually do require a 64-bit machine. The second thing you're going to want to do is always make sure you have the latest processor and device firmware. And this is going to become very, very important for you as we continue to evolve our driver base and feature base within Integration Designer, as well as our product base. Sometimes the processors do require that next generation of firmware in order to accommodate for the different technological advances that we do have in here. So please make sure that you do check your processor firmware, your device controller firmware for updates. And the third thing is you want to make sure you have the latest RTI panel application. Update that panel app, because multi-location is in the next iteration of that app. So it should prompt you that there's an update automatically, but if not, just go to your app store and you should be able to get that downloaded, no problem. Okay, so those are your basic requirements. But again, please, if you want to take advantage of that 11.3, make sure you have a 64-bit machine. Make sure you have all the device firmware updates that come out. And if you're not sure if you do have the latest updates or not, you can always go on to, check my device under Integration Designer for the firmware. You can check our websites. We send out communication via email if there are major updates like this to devices, firmwares, through newsletters. Okay, one of the things I want to address right out of the gate is that we did do a major bug fix in this iteration. Now, normally I don't like to talk about the negative, but we're all about transparency. We want to make sure that you're aware of why we did this bug fix. So the issue was that within Integration Designer, and once it was put into a system, Integration Designer and System Manager had a hard time doing internal tracking of any device, of any sources and rooms that were moved around, and it required you as a dealer to go back in and delete those and move them and then reallocate resources, and it really wasn't a good method. So we really wanted you as a dealer to be able to get in and out of those jobs faster, but we wanted the system to work just much more fluid. So with this bug fix, we were able to correctly monitor the movement and or deletion of all those rooms and sources as you're building the file internally, so that Integration Designer was able to automatically adjust any of the variables or the activities associated with those rooms and sources so that it's a smooth communication between system manager, between integration designer, the processor, all the whole 9 yards. Make sure that it knows exactly what it's reading and how it works. So nothing that you probably would have even noticed per se, as unless you're working on some really large scale systems with lots of different activities. But it was something we saw internally that did need to get corrected, and our team did a great job of making sure they specified exactly what it was. So that's the bug fix. Again, nothing major that you would have probably noticed anyway, but if you had, you now see that it's been taken care of. System updates. What did we do for the system? Well, there were a number of system updates within Integration Designer 11.3, and there's a difference in my mind between updates and new features. So I'm going to talk about some of these updates first, because there are features that were already in Integration Designer that we just made better more than anything. Okay. And the first update was that we increased the overall Integration Designer speed. So what does that mean? That means that System Manager works faster. It's able to track things. It's things a lot quicker. It's able to adjust and react faster. The program file compiling and loading has been significantly increased and sped up. And you may have noticed that already. That was one of the most obvious things, as well as adding in the project controllers and sources. It doesn't take nearly as long anymore to be able to build out those project files. So the benefit for you is, one, it's more responsive to your client, and two, it reduces your overhead cost of programming and sitting there and waiting for something to happen, right? So that's the first thing, is that we increase the overall compiling of the data within Integration Designer. We sped up System Manager to be able to work more fluid within itself, and being able to increase the speed of adding devices, controllers, rooms, etc. Second major update that we did was that we increased the system source count. Believe it or not, you were at one point only allowed to do about 100 sources in a single system. Now you can do up to 1,000, which is quite a few sources. And those are some larger scale systems. So what does this mean? Why did we increase this so much? Because of the ability for you to be able to grow your systems. We want you to increase your revenue line by being able to adapt to your clients' needs, add to them, sell them up on new features and new items. That's one of the major things that we wanted to make sure that there were no limitations, for the most part, within the system on the source count. 1,000 sources is a lot of sources, ladies and gentlemen, but again, we wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to grow with that. So that was the second major update. The third update, in the way that the device window structure for sending the program file to devices was done in the order. It used to be just kind of a hodgepodge, and they were kind of put everywhere. And as we started to develop that project-based programming approach, whereas you have your global area with the processor, and then you've got your specific rooms, and you're placing the source, the controllers in those specific rooms and sources, there needed to be a little bit more clear way to define how that looked, so that, and for navigation, so that you know, hey, I've just made an update to this, I need to update this one thing, you know exactly where it was, especially in larger scale systems. So the order itself is that the processor is always going to be at the top, okay, first and foremost. Second, the room list will be next in order. So you can see on the right-hand side that the first rooms in there are global, then the room, family rooms, then office, etc. Within those rooms, we then classify it under the controller names A to Z. So again, the room list is going to be global on top, and then A to Z room list, and then the controller names within those rooms will be listed A to Z. So you may want to make sure to name those controllers. You can leave them as KA8s, but you more than likely have gotten into the habit of naming those controllers for what they are and where they are. And then the fourth one is that all the devices with configuration on the processor, such as RTI panel and surfers and things that require that live on the processor memory and require some sort of configuration outside of standard network, USB, or even Zigbee, will be placed at the bottom. So just an easier navigation, but that's where you can expect everything to be. All right, next update had to do with graphic design and the features and updates within graphic design. Now, the update we did for the graphic design part came with the grab handles and bars and the usability of those. The problem that we found, and you may have seen this before, is that when integration design, when you would zoom out on a device and you wanted to select something, it was almost became unusable to be able to move and select those items and move them around because it was so small. Now, when you do it, and I'll show you an example of this in just a moment. Now with this update, it will allow that selection of that specific device, even if you zoom way out, the ability for you to be able to identify the points and be able to make the adjustments if so desired. The other major update we did with the grab handles and the bar utility in there, in terms of being able to select the device or select the buttons, was that it wasn't necessarily usable if you had two buttons in close proximity to each other. In other words, if you had one button that was your title bar and then you had another image on top of it, if you wanted to select and drag over that title bar just a little bit and you selected it near the edge of where the image was, it would then change over to that image. Well, now if you select that title bar as an example and go over to the grab handle and drag it over, even if it's close by that other one, it will still remain selected and you can make the adjustment. It creates a much less frustrating design application. So I'll show you both those in just a second. The other feature, the new features that we included in Integration Designer 11.3 included some quick zoom in, zoom out, and move features. Now, what does that mean? Well, as most of you know, most areas or most programs in Windows-based devices, you can utilize a quick key shortcuts, as we can in Integration Designer 11, using like Control Q as an example to be able to change orientations. Now we've added in a quick zoom. So if you want to zoom in or zoom out on a device, selecting Control or holding Control and then using your mouse scroll wheel will zoom in on a device when that UI is selected very quickly and easily. So you don't have to go down to the bottom and find it and then zoom it in, zoom it out, or select a certain one. The other one is being able to move from left to right or up and down. Now, this is only going to take place if you have that selection or that display and it's larger than the screen you're working on at that point. And again, I'll show you both of these in just a moment here. But being able to hold Shift and then use that scroll wheel will move it left to right, and then alternatively, the Alt button plus mouse scroll wheel will move it up and down. So let me shift over real quick to Integration Designer here. All right, so as an example here, I'm just on this one, on this page. As you can see, I've got my iPad here, and it's looking like a standard iPad that we have. But if I wanted to zoom in, I'm going to hold my Control button down, zoom in, zoom out very quickly and easily. Now, if it's as big as it is right here, where the display is larger than the area, you'll notice that we have the ability to use the sliders on the top, on the right and left to do that. But I can also hold Shift as an example to move it left and right, or the Alt button and move it up and down. So it's a very easy way for us to show how we can zoom in and out using Control and the mouse wheel, and to be able to move it left to right using the Shift button and then the Alt button if the display is larger than the workspace area here. All right. So some very, very nice ways to be able to get continue working on your jobs and adding those features in there. Next, what else did we do? Well, one of the new features in Integration Designer 11.3 was, again, we talked about being transparent. One of the things that always came up in question was, well, how much memory do I have to use? How big is this file? How do I know if I'm using too much? And one of the things that could always do in Integration Designer was check the device memories, but you wanted to be able to see the overall system and wanted to really pull in that type of information. We've made it very easy for you now for both load monitoring and if you're getting close to that usage. So once again, let me shift over my screen here real quick to Integration Designer. So in this system, what you can do is you can take your cursor, go over to the global. Yeah, you can see it on the right. I don't know why it's not pulling it over. No, it's not going to let me. Let me pull up an example of it real quick here. I'm going to just open up a different file. Sorry, folks. I apologize. I had this all ready to. I'm going to bring this over here real quick. Vincent, can you see that Word doc okay? Or is it still showing something else? All right. So let me show you real quick what that looks like. I'm hoping this is what it is, and you all can see it. But essentially, when you hover over the global, it will give up this source count here, and it will show you what that system usage is and what the percentage of capacity is on. Okay, you can see it. Great. Thanks, everybody. So you can see that, I don't know why mine's not, but when you hover over the global area, it will show you what the system usage is. And then there actually will go even a little further into it. You can see that the source count is quite significant, and it's only 11%. But then the other part of this is that if you are getting really high end to exceeding it, for example, the system variables in this example, let me zoom in a little bit further here, states that it has it's got 142,000 system variables, which is 223% of capacity. There's a warning that will come up. It won't be obviously highlighted, but it does state there that the configuration is going to exceed the system capacity, for one. But also, if you try to send it to the file or send it to the processor, you're going to get an error message as well. So it won't even let you do it as long as it knows what that capacity is. So I apologize for that not working and showing it to, but at least you get to see it in this fashion. So again, you just hover over the global, and it will give you all this type of information. And this is valuable information to be able to know. So, hey, you got to find a way to work it every once in a while. All right. The third, another new feature is RTI authentication. Now, what is RTI authentication? So as more and more devices have decided to have their own type of authentication or authorization on their own proprietary sites and usage sites, things like Ring or MyQ, a number of others, even things like IC Realtime, where you have that native app or a site where you have to create your account and then link it up with the devices and be able to take advantage of all the features. Well, part of the hard part for a control company, and I'm sure many of you are used to this, is that in order to get access to those and to be able to authenticate the credentials of both the client, you had to put in not only how you were going to connect to said device, but you in Integration Designer, but you would also have to put in, say, the client's password and login names. Well, we've evolved a process now called authentication, where essentially what it's going to do is this is be able to communicate through a cloud-based communication system to those third-party devices on their native apps and sites, and be able to grab that okay, if you will, or the authorization from the client based on them signing in, and thus making the connection with the processor, and you not having to put in their credentials into the system itself. This solves another issue too, in that what if those credentials change, like login information or passwords, or the manufacturer pushes out a system reboot and everybody has to create a new password, whatever the case may be. The client, we've made it very easy for you as well as the client to not have to go roll out a truck to update that information on the programming software as well. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. But the other really cool thing about this is that it allows us the opportunity and opens the doors for us to be able to communicate and get those authentication for a number of third-party devices out there. Now, I'm not going to throw out any sort of names or what drivers are coming or available to it, but you may have seen this on Integration Designer already. So I wanted to bring it up and tell you kind of the basis about what it is. The one thing you do need to keep in mind is that it is completely dependent on that driver and that manufacturer of the product if it's going to be necessary to utilize this authentication feature. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about what the process looks like on this. So let me hop over to Integration Designer real quick. So in Integration Designer, you may have seen this already, in that when you go to the processor, there's a new section or an adjusted section. This used to say RTIQ, now it says Connected Features, and RTIQ is still in here, but there's a settings area. And in that settings area, you'll see that there's this driver authentication dashboard here. Okay, this is what we're going to be talking about here in just a second. So what's the process of getting a device? And this is a very base level process, but the important thing is that you have an idea of what that looks like. We do have full training ready to go for this, as well as individual modules and technical bulletins that are and will be available to you. But the first thing that we want to make sure you do is build out your system. You add in all of your devices, processor, controllers, rooms, sources. You go through and do all the configurations and properties for those. You get those all set up. And as you're going through the properties and set up for all of these different devices, you want to complete that process. And it's important to do so, because when you're adding in the devices, say the driver, the source drivers here, this connected feature, as you add those in, will show you if one is currently in the system that does need authentication here, that does need RTI authentication. You can see on my screen right now, it says there are currently no drivers installed in the system. And that's because we don't have any drivers out there that do utilize this yet. But if there was, it would say there is currently one driver installed in the system, or there are drivers installed in the system that require authentication. Okay, but it's important for you to go through the entire process of configuring all the devices first. The second reason for that is when you get in and start adding in there's two things that need to happen, right? You're configuring those devices, those source devices, because you want the processor to communicate with them. Well, part of that communication process for RTI authentication, we need that manufacturer of that device needs to know that it's there, that it's plugged in, that it can make that connection on both ends. So it's important for you to go through those configuration settings very, very carefully, whether it's adding in the IP addresses, the serial numbers, whatever is required in there, and then come in here and be able to do a couple of things. So the first thing you're going to want to do once everything is set up is name your system. Okay. Now, please make sure to name your system with the client name, location, something along those lines. Don't leave it as my system. Don't leave it as XP3. You would want to name it something, Mr. Larson's home, something along those lines, or Larson City Apartment, something along those lines, something that gives you an idea of where this project is, because what you name the system here is what will show up on your IQ monitoring dashboard for one thing, okay? But it's also part of what will help with the multi-location naming and the device and all that kind of, and the authentication as well. So make sure to name your system, okay? Don't just leave it as my system. The second part is the driver authentication dashboard here. Now you'll see a URL link right here. Again, we don't need to do anything with this yet. If we see that there is a driver currently installed in the system, we don't send this out. We don't launch the URL right away. What we need to do is we need to immediately go to the send to device and send the file directly to the processor. That's the only device you want to send to the processor, okay? You don't need to do any of the other ones in the system, just the processor. The reason for that is that the processor needs to make the connection again between, and it has to be online with the devices, connected to the online network, as well as the devices that are within network, to be able to make that connection. So it's important that it's online, it's plugged into the same network, and that it can communicate with outside network. Send the file to the processor, and then you can launch the URL. Okay. Now you don't have to do the URL till the very last thing. In fact, your client can even do the URL, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. You can continue to go through and program all of the user interface, all the activities, all that kind of fun stuff. But it's very, very important for you to make sure that if you do have drivers installed in the system, after you've gone through the configuration, to send the file for the processor to it right away. And then when you're ready to do the URL and all that kind of fun stuff, you can do that. Now, what's the difference between the copy URL and launch URL? Well, launch URL, if I click on it, will immediately open up this RTI authentication dashboard on your browser, and it would show up the drivers once they've been downloaded to the processor and the processor connects to the internet. It tells you exactly right here, which is great. So it'll bring up this dashboard that would show this. And again, if we had the drivers in there, we would click on it and put in our credentials. It's as easy as that. Now, the copy one, however, that's if you want that little more security. If your client isn't going to give you their login password and name for their what device or that manufacturer or whatever site it is, that's okay. You can copy this URL, tells you exactly what it does, and then you send it to your user and they can open up that authentication dashboard and enter in their credentials. It's a security feature that you can offer them for one, because then you don't have it on your hands like, hey, I don't have your login stuff. You did it yourself. But here's the other cool part about this is that down the road, if for some reason the manufacturer pushes out a change and the client needs to recreate a password or does a new login or whatever the case may be, you don't need to roll the truck out and put that into the processor anymore. They just need to launch this URL. They can call you and say, hey, this isn't working. I'm trying to control this device and it just isn't working. The first thing you can ask is, well, obviously what the device is. But second, you can say, did your password change? Or do you know if your password changed for those devices on their sites, on their apps? Have them go to the app. If it did, and they need to change it, great. But then you can send them this URL link and then they can enter it in. You're not rolling out a truck. It's secure. It's an easy way to get that client back up and running a lot faster. Okay. So again, quick process is you load in the devices, the processor, the controllers, all the source-based drivers. You configure them all. And then once you've configured them all, you go into the properties of the processor under the settings or connected feature settings. You name the system. You look if there is currently a driver installed. You immediately go to the send file. You send the system file to that processor. And then once that's on the processor, you continue programming the rest of your system, whether it's the UIs or whatever else is the activities, automations, etc. And then when you're ready to deploy, you have the client enter in their URL or you enter it in yourself from the dashboard. About as easy as that, folks. So very, very cool way to do it. And again, we have training videos that are come out and walk you through that whole process. Now let's keep going with this. One of the other features that we've launched as of recently is RTI multi-location. Now you may have seen some of this. You may have seen that there was an app update as of recent. But what is RTI multi-location? Why do we offer it? Well, this is actually one of the most requested items of RTI panel forever, ever since RTI panels. Being able to easily control multiple systems without actually having to reconfigure the app and select the device for each individual one each time. The idea behind this is that it provides the client easy to use, quick access to their for multiple locations directly from their RTI panel. So where would this take place? What type of applications would this take place in? The first application, in my mind at least, is that business owner who wants to make sure and check in on their cameras for their restaurants or their apartment complexes and be able to control those directly from their RTI panel app quickly and easily just by selecting them from either a list or being able to have a direct connect, which we'll show you what those look like here in a second. So you have that ability in there as well. Business owners, even multiple homes, if you want to use multiple homes as an example and being able to say, you know what, I'm going from my city apartment and I'm now going to the beach house. I want to turn on the AC so that when I get there, it's nice and cool because it's the middle of summer. You can flip over to that RTI panel to that secondary location, open it up, turn on the AC, flip it back to the one you're on, and you're still controlling where you are at, but that other system is already kicked on and rocking. So it's a very, very versatile piece. What's the process and integration designer to get this set up? Okay, well, there's a few different things. The first thing I want to emphasize is that you need to make note of the remote access information for all the different control systems that you're going to access from RTI panel. And that means the static IP addresses, the, any dynamic DNS addresses, what they are for which system, and make note of those, okay? Because you're going to need to enter those into the app itself as you go along. The second part of this is to make sure you have the app updated. Obviously, the latest version of the app has this feature, the older version does not. So if there is a need, generally we try to force out that app update to everybody, but everybody has their own option to do it if they want. So that's the first thing. The second thing is when you're adding RTI panel devices and ID, please make sure to use the location name as part of the device name. Okay, so let's flip over to ID real quick. So in Integration Designer here, when you're going in and you're adding in your controllers, it is very important for you to not name those just RTI panel iPad, because that's what it's always named. You're going to want to name this because this is how it's going to come up when you're adding it into the system of different devices, is say something like, well, let's just use Larson Beach House, an iPad if you really want to do iPad. And you name it as such like that, because this is the name that when you go to add the system in, it will show you as the selectable file. It's going to name it as that, right? So you want to make sure to name it accurately for the location it's in and what the device is. If there's going to be more than one device in here, you just need to, name them as such. Larson Beach House, family iPad, Mr. Larson iPhone Beach House, because again, you're going to be selecting those. The multi-location on the phones is really where I see this feature really occurring a lot, is taking your phone, opening it up, and making that quick change. Okay, so make sure you name that as such. The second part about this is that when you are going through and adding these devices in, you do need to issue specific commands to the specific areas. For direct selection, for being able to get back to the main welcome screen without having to do, say, like a reconfigure or anything of that nature. We want you to have access. We want your client to be able to easily navigate back to that initial welcome screen, which I'll, again, show you here in just a moment. But the commands themselves are actually located under the Objects tab in Integration Designer 11 under RTI Panel Commands. And there's 3 of them. Return to welcome screen, switch system, and switch to specific system. Return to welcome screen will bring you back to the general screen for Integration Designer, for RTI panel on whatever device you're using, where it will have the systems listed out and you can select it from there. Okay. Generally speaking, you probably don't want to use this one. You will generally you're going to want to have, say I put it on this one, and it's, of course, notated by the letter C on this button itself, indicating that there's a command there, is that the switch to system will bring up a pop-up that will show you all this other systems that are available to choose from. And this pop-up window will, any available system will be in blue, and the top one that you're currently on would be in gray. So we could have, if we're at the apartment, we've got our apartment there, and then the beach house, and then maybe the mountain, cottage or whatever else is underneath here on just a simple pop-up. They select it, it switches over. Switch to specific system is an index-based command. What an index-based command means is that each one of the systems that we add into RTI panel is assigned a specific index-based number, starting with 0. So the first system we add in is going to be 0. The second, 1. The third, 2. So again, this system is the city apartment. That would be the first one we add in. That would be index 0. So if you wanted to have a direct selectionable area, such as, hey, instead of master bedroom, we'd say switch to beach house. It's probably gonna be too much text, but stretch it out here a little bit. There we go. Switch to beach house. Right? I could then say, okay, the beach house is actually index number 1 because the second system. I'm going to drag that to this particular button, and now they touch this, it will instantaneously switch. Instead of giving me the option to choose to switch, it will immediately switch. These are the 2 that I would imagine you will use the most. The only time, again, you would need the return to welcome screen is if for some reason you needed to re-add the system or go in and do some maintenance in there, or if the client wants to rename them for whatever reason, they certainly can. We do give them options on how to do that as well. But these are the two that I would recommend you utilize: switch to system and switch to specific system. Now, before we leave Integration Designer here, we did also create 3 new bitmaps available for you to help identify the switch to commands. So if we go into the Coral icons and type in switch, there's our switch home, switch location, switch processor, and you can just drag and put these on where you feel necessary. If you want to use these, that's great. If you want to create your own, you want to have, a picture of a beach or somebody swimming or a pool, something along, pool house like that, switch to beach house. There we go. You could utilize that image, but we did add these four in here under switch, under the Coral icons area. We didn't add this one in, obviously that's Nintendo, but you've got your switch conference rooms, switch homes, switch location, and switch processor. All right. So some cool new, some fun new icons for you to be able to utilize. All right. Now that we have this system set up for the most part in here, where we're going to switch to a specific system or switch to a beach house, then we would need to set it up on the RTI panel app itself. Now, this is where we mentioned that you want to take advantage of writing down the information of where, the remote access side of things. So under the file system properties, if you're not familiar, under RTI panel virtual panel, this is where you're going to place your external IP, your remote access capabilities in here. Whatever it's a static IP address or, once again, a dynamic DNS, but this is where you want to make note of all the systems, because again, even if you're in one local system, you're going to want to add in the additional ones down the road, or as you add them in, excuse me. Okay. So once you have note of all that, then we can go ahead and I'm going to show you the kind of what it looks like here. And I'm actually going to have to go to a certain one. Give me a second here. I was trying to get my iPad to emulate a screen on here, and I was having a bear of a time on it. Imagine that, right? So I'm going to throw this screen up just so that you all can kind of see what this looks like. All right. So this is part of the video that it's over here. I'll make this bigger here. So this is what the new information, the welcome screen looks like. When you select it itself here, when you select the iPad and you're in that main area, it's going to download the configuration just like we did before. Right? So there's our main house. Now, if we want, and we want to add in a new system into this and add to our existing one, we press that little area, the back up here. Second, it's going a little fast. This is part of the video that I made. So it downloads the configuration. Then if you're going to add a secondary system, you'll press the tool button at the top. Then you'll select the edit button. And once you've selected the edit button, you can press the plus button. Press plus, it brings you back to this screen where then you can enter in that manually configured information. So we would select manual configuration. Come on. We hit the plus button. We select the manual configuration here, enter in whatever the IP address is for that particular client or that remote access that we made note of before. Once we've added in that server address, we select it. As long as it's port routed correctly, then we can select whatever we titled that particular one in. It will download the configuration to the app. And once it's completed, you'll see both of them on the main welcome screen. We select the main home as an example, and you'll see at the bottom, I have manage all locations, select locations menu, and switch to beach house. So if we were to select, say, excuse me, So if you were to select the locations menu, there's the pop-up. You see the one that's grayed out? Oh, back up here real quick. So you select that the locations menu, you see how one is grayed out and one is blue. This is the one that is currently available for you to switch to versus this one that is the one we are currently on, the main home. Once you select that beach house, in this case, and it would automatically load the system in and switch over. Okay, now if we were on this main screen, once again, and we wanted to, if we wanted to name any of these, rename them, make it different, you know, all that kind of fun stuff on here, we would select the edit button and you would have the ability then to rename those if so desired, as you can see right here. So if you do have the access to be able to do that, you can also toggle on auto select last system, which allows you to have the last system you used automatically open up every single time, the one that you've used the most. Okay, and then, excuse me. So you do have quite a few different features in regards to what this looks like. The reason we say we don't want you to, or the reason I don't recommend that you have the client have access to this is that you may have noticed on here that when you do select the edit button on the main page, they actually can delete the system too. And then you're going to have to go through the process again. So I would recommend that you don't let them have access to this screen if possible, just that the switch to system or select or switch to direct system or select from those systems that they have available. Those two commands, I think they'll have a much better experience. But if the need is there, you can certainly give them this as well. Okay. So really with this RTI panel authentication and the ability for us, I'm sorry, not authentication, the ability for you as an integrator to be able to offer your clients the ability to just quickly switch to a different system. And that was live. I mean, that was as fast as it was, you know, being able to just select from the location or just touch that switch to beach house, which I did in that case, and have it just switch right over, makes the experience that much more enjoyable for the client. Okay. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions, so I wanted to leave a little bit of time, but you know, the final few thoughts that I have for you is that one, we're going to have quite a bit of training, in-depth training that goes through Integration Designer for the RTI authentication, and as well as the multi-location. There are some details in regards to utilizing the RTI authentication that you will need to be aware of that goes in a little bit more depth and detail than we need to today. But please take a look at those videos. We'll make sure to post them as soon as given the opportunity. So with that, I wanted to open up to questions and see if there's anything else that anybody wanted to see. Again, I apologize for the issues that we were having with some of this stuff today, but let's open it up to some questions.
So someone's asking to show the pop-up for the location swap. So simply put, that's not something you guys have to worry about programming. It's kind of built into the actual object. So when you press that button, it's going to pop up a list of the other locations or homes or businesses if you're commercial, and it's going to give you the ability to quickly switch to that location at the press of a button. So what you see there has not been programmed by you, the installer. That's built into the actual object, no work required. So press the button, boom, a list of locations pops up, press a location, boom, you're in there. So it's an incredible process.
The second important part about that is that it's based on what the naming is here under the selected system. This is exactly how it's going to be laid out when it pops up. Hence why we need to make sure to name those devices correctly.
So someone's asking if this RTI multi-location feature is available on other panels. Right now, it's only available on RTI panel. So that would exclude our, in-wall keypads, but nothing stops you from mounting an Android-based or iOS-based tablet in the wall. But right now, those are going to be the only, the phones and tablets are going to be the only support for multi-location right now. I don't
And
think
those are
people are
gonna be
going to
the
walk
more-
out of the house with a keypad. That's why.
Yeah. And I mean, if we think about application use, yeah, it would be nice to have on the additional panels, but the true application use for these are going to be on phones and maybe even tablets, probably even more phones than anything, just to switch up, because that goes with you everywhere. Maybe your iPad stays home. I don't know if you're going on vacation, but you always bring your phone. So
So good question. Kurt is asking, is there a way to secure this location switching with a password? And the simple answer to that is simply provide a security password on your iPad. So Tyler, if you could just show them in the properties of the iPad how to do that. Go to your iPad properties, select security, put a password in there, and you'll have to enter it in. So that's a good question. Is there a plan to add music party mode to quickly add delete rooms on the fly? Not sure what that means. Pretty sure you could do that now through programming, since we have a link and unlink feature with RTI Music, and we have a grouping feature available on our audio distribution. But that's probably a conversation on another platform. Maybe email to me directly, and we can talk about your needs.
yeah, let's figure out what exactly you're looking to do on that one. How many locations can you add? As many as you want.
Yeah, we're pretty, we didn't really put a limit on it. So if you find you're getting some kind of adverse reaction and you have lots of systems, let us know so we can quickly address it. But I'm pretty positive that we're not going to hit a max.
So how does
If you do.
authentication work with two-factor authentication? So what we're doing in this is we are communicating through what's called a online authorization cloud. And what these manufacturers do is that the two-factor authentication comes on their side of things. What we're doing is we're communicating directly with those manufacturers through this cloud-based security system, so that if the client signs in and puts it in there, then it basically transfers that two-factor that may have been on that native device through the OAuth cloud-based security system to the controller, or to the processor, excuse me. What questions we have? I saw a bunch earlier.
Yeah, I answered them, but
You got them all?
nothing real. Let's see if there's anything. So just to talk a little bit about the new feature we have with authenticating drivers. That opens the door for a lot of driver development. Not only will we be able to do drivers that we otherwise weren't able to do, but existing drivers you might see revamped in certain ways. For example, drivers that require some kind of a tedious authentication process where you have to type in keys and authenticate and do things through a driver now would be done directly to the actual cloud server. So that'll improve the process fivefold, but also open the door for a lot of development. So I know it's not related, but what are the options for 70-volt amplifiers compatible with the XP6 controller? Well, that depends on your needs. There's tons of 70-volt amplifiers out there in the market that you could pre-out to our audio distribution devices like an AD16 or 88X, or you could simply use it on its own if it has enough features. But it depends where you do your shopping, what you're trained in. But
yeah, but we have drivers for BSS, Atlas,
Snap
Hemispheres,
AV's line.
we have Klipsch. They're 1,500 watt or 1,500 models that do 70-volt, 100-volt. There's a bunch of them in there. I'm trying to think of other ones that we have, but yeah, those are available.
All of Snap AV's line, which is
Snap AV
a lot. But yeah, I mean, there's so many products on the. I don't even think you need to control it. to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Whether we
sometimes
have a
it's simple
driver or
as
not.
just a trigger to turn it on.
Exactly. So the recording will be available later on. Tyler, do you have it set up to automatically email people? How does that work?
And what I do is I'll send it out to everybody. So you should
Okay.
get it tomorrow. I kind of go through the video to make sure it's a good recording more than anything. And then I send out not only just the video link, but I also send out any additional resources that are available for it. And that should be, I would imagine I can have that by tomorrow, if not Monday at the latest. Got a lot going on, but yeah, it's kind of what we're looking at. So you'll get that for sure. All right. Any other questions out there?
Looks like there's no more questions for now.
Will we be
Of course.
moving away from the need for port forwards? Oh, you answered that one. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day or night or morning, wherever you are in the world. And we look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. Have a great one, everybody. Thank you.